All right. Well, we're doing great with attendees. So in an effort to be respectful of everyone's time, we're going to kick off. So welcome everyone to our Burns webinar on mapping out the fleet electrification journey. This is number 3 in this series, and we are chatting today about public transit agencies sharing their routes to success. My name's Erica Antone. I'm a project manager here at Burns, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you our fleet electrification expert panelists. We have Jason House, the Assistant Chief Engineer of the Chicago Transit Authority, Matthew Nawn, the Chief of Technical Services Division at the FTA, and then Macy Nishanti, the Executive Director and CEO at Antelope Valley Transit Authority. We're going to go through a question and answer as part of this discussion, and we'll open up the floor for attendees' questions. If you have them throughout the presentation, you can enter them. There's a Q&A chat box that we'll be able to see, and then I will facilitate that discussion at the end of the presentation. So to start off, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to briefly introduce yourself, your agency, and your battery electric bus fleet. And we can start with Jason.
Sure. Jason House, Assistant Chief Bus Equipment Engineer. I work in the Vehicle Engineering Department. I lead up the electrification effort from both a vehicle and sort of charging infrastructure, while working with my colleagues in the infrastructure engineering group. Right now at Chicago Transit, obviously, I think you guys know where we're located. City of Chicago, second largest transit agency in the country. We have 1,860 some odd buses right now, depending on what's getting replaced. That number can vary. Number of routes, we have many, I think over 100. Depots, we have seven garages. We house about anywhere from 250 to 300 buses. Many of our garages are sort of over their design capacity. So part of the challenge for us is going to be, how do we deal with electrification at the depot level while maintaining sort of capacity at the garages. We have been running 2 New Flyer electric buses since 2014. We did the contracts on those in late 2012. So we have significant experience. Those were AC charged in the beginning, but now they're DC charged 1772, just like your normal, I guess, consumer vehicles. We plug them in. We have a number of 60 kilowatt chargers, and they typically take like 2 to 3, maybe 4 hours, depending on how depleted the SOC is, to charge up. Recently, we've done a contract that was awarded to Proterra, where we do on-route charging. We have 5 overhead on-route chargers set up with that contract through Heliox, who is one of the leading overhead charge pantograph manufacturers. In the States, we've now named that J3105. It's recently published in early 2020. Those have been running in service since about March. We have 6 buses in service right now. 3 more newer Proterras under their newer branding, which is called ZX5. It's an 800-volt architecture bus with 440 kilowatt hour capacity batteries. So there's 4 battery packs between the wheel wells. All our buses, the contracts for up to 45. We've committed to buy 23 of those buses so far, and we have 22 options remaining. We anticipate to sort of have that 45 units fleet completed, most likely in the next couple of years. They're all deployed on our Route 66, which is our sort of main route that crosses Navy Pier, which maybe many of you are familiar with, and goes westbound on Chicago Avenue all the way to the Chicago-Austin intersections. It's about a 11-mile route. The buses charge on both the endpoints. Typically, they're sitting at the endpoints for about 5 to 10 minutes, maybe an average of 7.5. During that time period, they're charged with they're 450 kW chargers. They get about maybe 22 miles of range every time they charge. And they've been doing pretty well since March. So hopefully that's a pretty good introduction. Thanks,
Great.
Erica.
Thank you. Macy? Oh no, my favorite reference. You're muted.
Muted.
Just when I thought I was getting smarter than that, I regress. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
So I'm Mason Ishadi. I'm up here at the Antelope Valley Transit Authority in beautiful North LA County, High Desert, AVTA for short. We butt up against Kern County in the Bakersfield area and then LA proper on the south side of us. We've been delving into the electric bus market since 2014 when we bought our first 2 40-footers. In 2016, we made the public statement that we would be an all-electric fleet, and that we were the first transit system in the nation to commit to that. We've honored that commitment. We are currently have 67 all-electric buses in our local transit fleet, which is 100% electric now. And that's 54 40-foot and 35-foot full-size buses, and a handful of green power 27-foot electric vans that we use in our micro transit and dollar ride service. We have a service area of about 450,000 residents covered in 1,200 square miles of territory. So we have a pretty broad area to cover. And so our charging system includes depot charging for the nighttime overnight charges, and that consists of mostly 80 kilowatt chargers. We do have a couple 200. We have 13 200 kilowatt chargers for our 60-foot. So we take advantage of that. And then we have 4 completed inductive charging depots, 2 in the city of Palmdale, 2 in the city of Lancaster, and we have a 5th one under construction at the Antelope Valley Junior College, which we're going to turn into a little mini transfer center. And that should be finished in about 60 days. That project's been a little bit slower because we have to kind of pace the remodeling construction that's going on at the college itself. So we're kind of a sub to that project. We've had really good luck with the inductive charging system. It does require a little bit of retraining with the operators to teach them how to line up correctly on the lines we painted on the ground to get up under the pad correctly to get maximum charge. The pads are forgiving to a degree. They have about a 6-inch margin of error in any one direction. But the closer you come to a perfect alignment, the higher the charge rate, obviously. So that's that completes the local transit story. I said we're 100% all electric. That constitutes about 67 buses. We do have 24 MCIs on order for our commuter fleet. Those are start arriving here this August, and we'll be finished with that delivery in December. And that'll complete the 100% conversion of our commuter fleet for our LA commutes. And that'll put us at, do some quick math, 89 buses total, and that'll make us an all-electric fleet on both sides, the local and the commuter side. We also have funding available from the FTA, thank you, for another 28 buses, and those are being gradually put on order. We have 10 60-footers on order. We have 6 30-footers on order. and we will be ordering another 8 40-footers through the build grant that we were awarded, along with 13 more of the 27-foot vans. Don't try to do the math because I'm leaving out some of the smaller buses, but we do have 28 more buses on order, and so that'll put our fleet just over 100 by the about 12 months from now. And again, it's going to be all electric. We're fully committed.
Thank you. And Matthew.
Yes, good afternoon to the folks on the East Coast and folks on the West Coast. FTA is really honored to participate today, and we thank you, Erica, for coordinating this webinar. Of course, we don't have a fleet at FTA, but one of our missions and goals are to continue to promote, and even more so in the current administration, zero emission technologies, particularly for transit vehicles, and what we're here to talk about today, transit buses. We touch on fleet electrification in a number of areas through some of our research and demonstration programs. Our bus testing program, of course, familiar to many, probably on this call, our low and no emissions program, as well as how rolling stock is often a component of our CIG, or capital investment grant projects, particularly, of course, our bus rapid transit projects and the like, as well as Buy America implications of buses, as FTA has studied in recent years that compliance is still met. This is a growing field, of course, as folks like Macy and Jason continue to advance their fleets of electric vehicles. The demand for FTA funding for these vehicles only continues to increase. The Low-No program has always outpaced the number of applicants, I should say, has always outpaced the funds available. We look forward to that changing in the future. We see these vehicles, of course, getting great support with our current administration, as well as the demand for them continues to grow in parallel with the technology. So again, we don't have any vehicles, but we are here to offer our insights, share and learn and listen. So thank you, Erica, and thank you, panelists.
Thank you. And I feel like you're understating your worth here, overseeing on a federal level these low-no programs and the impacts that it's going to have not only on the vehicle procurement, but capital projects and connecting to the utility infrastructure. Okay, so we are going to continue on our journey here through this slide deck. And I'm going to give both Jason and Macy the opportunity. I feel like you've touched on your agency's fleet electrification infrastructure. So in this instance, I guess you could just elaborate maybe more on the quantity of chargers that you're utilizing, what type of technologies, what rate you're charging at, maybe a ratio of on route versus depot, to give us a big picture when we get into these more detailed questions of what your agency has accomplished to date. Jason, do you want to lead us off?
Yeah, sure. I think I touched on it. I'll just give a brief summary of sort of the quantity and location of those chargers. And then I'll kind of get into why we did these first two projects the way we did, and what we're looking at doing in the future as we look towards full electrification. So we did commit, or at least the city committed, to all electric fleets by 2040. So we're currently doing like an e-bus master plan study to try to see how we can get there. It's not going to be easy. Sort of the larger your depots and the more depots you have, sort of the more complicated it gets in trying to get all the electricity there when you need it there, and stage all these projects over a period of time. So we're probably looking at a good 20 years of construction projects, with a lot of them, hopefully spaced out equally. But just to kind of recap what I covered in the introduction, so we have on the Proterra contract, which is the contract we've been working out of since like 2018, 2019, we have 2 on-route chargers at each terminus of the 66 route. And then one of those terminuses obviously is Navy Pier, as I mentioned, and we built Navy Pier to house up to 8 chargers. So we view that kind of as a on-route charging hub. We have, I think, 5 routes that converge there, and like almost 120 buses that flow through that terminus every day. So we anticipate having a load of almost 5 megawatts there. Right now, those chargers, the 2 that we have, are 450s. So we're 900-ish, just under a megawatt, and we are sort of ready to plug and play. We pre-built and ran conduit as well as foundations where we could. I think we built about half. I can get up to another 2 chargers almost just by running the cabling and buying the equipment. And then a couple other, I can get up to 8 just by adding some more foundations. So we're sort of ready to expand. We try to plan ahead as much as possible. And construction is not cheap in the city, as I'm sure Burns is aware of through many projects. And we've even worked on one of them with you all as well. So that route is sort of set to expand. We hope to fully electrify that route over the next couple of years, as I mentioned, with around 45 buses. We need about 39 of those with some spares to sort of run complete electric service. And that's kind of our first stepping stone. We also run the 2 new flyers. We converted those to BJ 3105 overhead pantograph compliant. New Flyer was nice enough to work with us on some leftover contract money, as well as FTA, to kind of get this done. So it allows us to sort of move buses around, and we installed an overhead fast charger at our Midway location. We have a bus turnaround in Midway Airport. So if you're ever through Midway and walking near the bus terminus, you'll find a pantograph mounted underneath the canopy, the second island in from the station. We're just sort of getting that up and commissioned and doing training. So that route, which will be the 63, should start revenue service very, very soon. Then we have one overhead charger, another Heliox in the garage itself. So when the vehicles are getting serviced, we actually, with the diesel buses today and diesel hybrids, we fuel them and clean them for about 15, 20 minutes each, and then repark them. So then when we're doing the electrics, we will charge them with the overhead. We put that sort of in the fueling, near the fueling lane, sort of on the north side, away from the fuel, obviously compliant with all the NFPA, NEC rules. And we sort of do our servicing process, integrating the charging with that. And then we anticipate to sort of roll that architecture out as we look to electrifying full electrification of the garages. Like I mentioned, between 250 to 300 buses per depot. We're currently working on the mix of buses to chargers as far as like what percentage are on route charged, which means just charged on the route really only, and then maybe charged during the maintenance period, like I mentioned, when we're servicing them, versus ones that are charged at the depot with, most likely would be, we're looking at, again, pantographs inverted, but depot with slow charging with a many to one output ratio on the charger, so that one charger can do 2 or 3 buses. And as we study that, if I had to guess right now, we're probably somewhere around a 60-40, 50-50 split. Most likely, some of our routes are 300 miles long, which is still a great challenge. I know you'll see advertisements out there like this bus can do 300 miles or 200 miles. Well, that's most likely down a mountain with the wind at its tails. So here in Chicago, that's just not going to happen, right? And then you have to factor in degradation of the batteries. You're probably talking a loss of 20% if you look at sort of standard battery warranties. You're going to want to come back with more than 0% SOC, most likely. You're going to have driver variance, which could be anywhere from 10 to 20%. So when you start stacking all that up, on a 440 kilowatt hour bus, no matter who the manufacturer is, not all of that's even usable. You're probably looking at 85 to 90% of that even being usable, where the rest is just reserved to preserve the battery health. And then you've got to start stacking all those tolerances into that. And then, you know, we're probably looking at effective range in worst case conditions, you know, which is for us going to be when it's really cold, probably around like 100 miles an hour of range. So that's why we went with en route, especially for these first applications.
Right.
Like I said, some of these buses are run 300 miles and they're out for 20 hours. So we wouldn't be able to run service like we want to with just depot charging only. So we see really the solution for Chicago and a lot of the larger agencies is going to be some sort of mix of the two, unless we have a giant leap forward in technology. So thanks.
Agreed. And I think that what we're all working through right now is optimizing those ratios with the variables and the technology advancements. Macy, can you provide a little more detail on your fleet?
Sure. Make sure I'm unmuted. I'm unmuted. Well, let me think here. What else could I add? We do have, from a depot standpoint, we have 43 80 kilowatt chargers and 19 200 kilowatt chargers. And our goal is to have them leave the yard full every morning so that we get them off to a good start. We're in a much milder climate than Jason, so we don't have quite as much of the stacking of degradation issues that he's describing. So our 150 mile buses get 130, 140, depending on the driver. There will be battery degradation like Jason described. So toward the end of life, we anticipate some of those buses will be down around 110, 100 mile range. Our 60 footers have a 590 kilowatt battery pack, and they do tend to get up in the 240, 250 range before opportunity charging. But still in all, the opportunity charging is what gives us the peace of mind of knowing we can replace our diesel bus performance in terms of how many hours a day each bus needs to run continuously, and do so without causing service interruptions. So that's kind of the nutshell of our infrastructure. We do, like I said, we will have 5 opportunity charging terminals, 2 in Palmdale, 2 in Lancaster, actually, and the 3rd one in Lancaster, and they each have 3 pads. So we have the ability to charge 15 buses at any given time, depending on where they are in the city. We anticipate a time where, as we optimize our routes and our schedules, that will, on any given minute of the day, there should be 15 buses parked on the pads around the cities, getting a 10-minute opportunity charge. Some of the things that we've learned as we've gone through this journey is that you do need to put a lot more time and effort into route optimization in terms of your run cuts and schedules. So we're in the process of doing that. But all in all, we have found this journey to be extremely gratifying. We look at the numbers in terms of CO emissions that we've cut and PM emissions that we reduced, and the environmental benefits we've generated, not to mention the financial benefits. And it's amazing. If you later on, or when you tell me that we have a couple minutes, I'd love to share a couple statistics with you in terms of what we've done in 5 million electric miles, in terms of how much money we've saved in fuel, how much how much emissions we've spared. And then we did a what-if scenario of if we could click our fingers and make the whole U.S. fleet all electric overnight, how much money that would save the U.S. taxpayer, and how much money that would put back in the FDA's pockets to spend on other really cool things. So anyway, we're thrilled that we're doing what we're doing. We would not change our minds if we could go back to zero.
Yes, I think everyone on this call appreciates all the environmental benefits and community benefits that are coming out of transitioning to zero emission vehicles. So you noted that you have a fleet that is charged through induction. Can you briefly describe the process and logics of why you selected that technology?
Well, a couple things. When we selected the inductive charging technology back in 2016-ish, the pantograph had not really started to take over the thinking in the U.S. market. I think there were some cities in Canada that were exploring that, and I think New Flyer maybe in 2018 or 2017 came out with their bus that had the pantograph actually installed in the bus and came up from the bus to meet a stationary bar, and we immediately saw some issues with that. Where on a cold night, the pantograph would freeze and would not extend, and things like that. So, and being an old mechanic, I inherently shy away from things that put men on top of buses or on ladders and try to fix moving objects 20 and 30 feet in the air, because I just don't like the workman's comp implications of that kind of technology. And that's just a personal thing. That's not a criticism or a reflection on other people's choices or their decision-making processes. But I just remember when I was an old mechanic, or a young mechanic, I'm old, but when I was a mechanic a lot of years ago, just past the dinosaur age, I think. But anyway, I hated getting on top of bus roofs. They're crowned and they slope away from the center, and just a real skittish feeling. So I didn't like that idea of putting our mechanics in that kind of an environment. So inductive charging had the attraction of no moving parts, no added weight to the bus in terms of the pantograph system when that was the first iteration. I do like the pantographs that extend from the air and to a stationary bar on the bus. I think that makes a lot more sense and a lot more attractive. But Wave had, at that time, they had a 250 kilowatt unit under design. We thought that was a really good rate of charge. I know there's a lot of people that are moving to faster and faster, higher and higher power chargers, but again, I'm an old school guy that still believes in the fact that heat is the enemy of batteries. Heat tends to equal wear in my mind. So there's only so fast you can charge a battery before you start taking a toll on its overall life cycle too. And so we're being a little more cautious in that regard. And again, that may be just a reflection of me and my age and my philosophy and all that. But I think 250 is a really good rate. It works out well in our fleet. It gives the buses just what they need without really creating a lot of excess heat. And again, being in Antelope Valley up here, we do get a lot of summertime temperatures in the 105, 107, 110 degree range. And so when the batteries are already at ambient in that temperature range, and then you start pumping a bunch of juice into them, you do have to really be careful about that, the C-rate ratio. So a lot of that kind of thinking went into it, and Wave just seemed to make a lot of sense at the time.
Thank you. I think a common theme that we are going to discuss today is the ability to be flexible, to adapt, and to also try to mitigate and limit those variables and challenges associated with the technology or environment or use. I'm going to advance these slides. Question number 2 today. How has funding, legislation, and or utility agreements impacted your fleet electrification journey? I'm going to hand this off to Matthew first, and we'll just go through the line.
Thank you, Erica. Sure, for this topic, let's touch funding first. As I mentioned in the introduction, there's always been, at least in recent years, more interest in funding and far more applicants for let's talk low and no emissions program funding than there has been funding available. That makes the program very highly competitive. The proposals, having been a reviewer, they're very competitive. It's a very challenging program to get, although the results have been rewarding for those that have. I do see, coupled with legislation, an effort to increase funding for zero emissions vehicles with FTA. I don't have anything concrete I can give you right now. I don't have numbers or a date. We control a lot of things, but at my level, we don't control the legislative process, of course. That said, though, I definitely see these vehicles and the funding continuing to grow as the interest continues to grow, and in parallel to that, the number of users continues to grow. It wasn't all that long ago, there weren't that many vendors too. There are more vendors in the market than there were even when FTA studied Buy America about 3 years ago. I think that's, it's impacted things in terms of it's slowed some of the growth, but at the same time, it's also given some time for lessons learned. I think lessons learned are very important. Macy and Jason have talked about that, what to really expect with ranges. There's a lot of, if you want to say, consultants and services out there that can really help optimize grantees, public transit agencies, opportunities with these vehicles. Of course, we have seen some early lessons where the vehicle itself or other challenges didn't make it the best fit, but through lessons, through information sharing, through opportunities like this, we feel that it helps only make the industry smarter about it. We learn from it. And again, this is a growing segment. This is certainly not going to go away. It's only going to continue to grow. There's a legislative push, an administrative push to continue to grow zero emissions vehicles. And I think you will see, and the industry will see, continued opportunities to go in that direction. And it's an exciting future.
Thank you. Macy?
You can't underestimate the impact of funding, legislation, and assistance and partnerships from the FDA, from our local agencies in California, CalSTA, the California HVIP fund, which gives us about $150,000 on a 60-foot bus, for instance, credit. Those have all just been huge drivers in getting this thing going. We've been very, very fortunate to receive 2 low-no grants from the FTA. Thank you, Matt. And then recently a build grant from the DOT. That build grant's enabling us to buy the 8 40-footers, the 6 30-footers, and the 13 green power vans. So funding and legislation has been just absolutely imperative in terms of helping things come along. Utility agreements, we agreed to disagree, so we're building our own solar farm on the backside of our property that will provide us 18 megawatts of solar, 9 megawatts of battery, and will allow us to be completely off grid and go to a neutral carbon footprint. So we're excited about that. And again, I think that anyone who's moving down this path needs to not have blinders on. You need to have a real broad peripheral vision and look for every opportunity, whether it's in legislation, whether it's in grant funding, whether it's in local impact, local EPAs. Our Air Quality Management District has been very helpful to us. I think there's a lot of people who want to help bring this about, because they are, whether there are senators or congressmen, whether there are local politicians, air quality management districts, they all see the environmental benefits, but there's also massive economic benefits to doing this. So they're all willing to help. I think it's just a matter of opening up those lines of communication, having that dialogue.
Agreed. Jason?
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate what everybody else is saying, we couldn't have done what we've been able to do without the FTA funding. Just the challenges of getting these types of projects going, since there are very infrastructure heavy, especially what we were doing with trying to make something that's expandable. We also put all of our chargers inside buildings, because we, are exposed to the elements, and we also are in, sort of architecturally protected zones. Like, we can't just put chargers out on the street in Navy Pier, right? They're never going to let us do that, right? So we built sort of like a power distribution building. It's probably somewhere around 1,600, 2,000 square feet. So it's a pretty big building. And I'll send some of the pictures to Erica after this, so you can get a feel for sort of the size of the charging cabinets. They're about 15 feet long. They're liquid cooled, and 10, like I think we'd say probably 8 to 10 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet deep. So they're pretty big, you know, per unit. And we build a building to house 8 of them. So those kind of investments are, you know, would not be, I think, possible at the current timing without the FTA funding. So we do thank the FTA and sort of the belief in electric vehicles and all the support they give us. As far as utility coordination, we've started working with ComEd, probably really planning as far as like distribution networks and where we had capacity, probably in 2015. And all I can recommend is start early. I think we're lucky enough that we only have one entity to deal with. I think out west sometimes you have many different players within your region. It sort of complicate things. I think just working with utility, figuring out where the capacity is, and then figuring out sort of what your roadmap is, and then aligning that roadmap with utilities' capacities and the expansions that you're going to have to ask them for, which more likely than not they don't have, you know, sort of the 10 megawatts we sort of anticipate needing for a fully electric garage,
Right.
somewhere in that ballpark. Like, generally, that's just not going to be sitting there available, right? There's going to have to be some planning involved. It's going to take the utility probably 2 to 3 years, most likely, at least. I've heard some horror stories out west where it's like that's not going to happen for 6 years. So you really have to get started early and plan ahead, and it's a huge part of the planning process and your overall roadmap. I think we might be running a little short on time, so I'll cap it at that and hopefully leave some time for questions. All right.
You guys are doing great.
We're doing good? Okay. All right.
You're leading right into the next questions. What is the greatest challenge your agency has to overcome to date? Some of the things that we've already touched upon are battery degradation, variables with weather, utility coordination, I feel like is #1 on almost every transit agency's list. What else can we add to this list? I'm going to leave the floor open, so feel free to unmute yourself and.
I mean, I think funding for us, I mean, we probably need billions of dollars, at least a few, to convert the fleet and all the garages. I mean, we most likely need another garage too, since we're over capacity anyway at almost all of our garages. When you start putting this infrastructure in, right, you're going to displace some of those vehicles, and we don't really know where we're going to put them yet. So, you know, most likely, we haven't had a new garage, I think, for it's probably almost 30 years. So we're probably overdue, and you know that might be half $500 million just for that garage to house 300, 400 buses. Because obviously, I think we should, you know, plan for hopefully increased capacity, which is part of the roadmap planning process as well. I think funding is a big part of it, and then just seeing how to scale efficiently. I think the smaller agencies are sort of leading the way at getting fully electric, but the problem is different for larger agencies. When you start putting 300 buses in one site, it's just the amount of power you need just becomes a little bit more of a challenge. So
Power, space,
exactly.
operational logistics, maintenance needs.
Yeah.
Macy, do you have any challenges to add?
The only thing I would point out is, and Jason's absolutely right, it's a much, much bigger hurdle for a large fleet than it is for a small fleet. But I think the one common thread that runs through all is the basic human nature to oppose change and be fearful of it and all that. So I think no matter how big or small your agency is, if you keep that in the forefront of your conversion process, and be aware of the fact that you're going to have people in your organization that are higher on the end of the scale of fear, uncertain, FUD, I call it, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and are change resistant. There's, you're going to have people that are very willing to change. They're a small minority. You're going to have people that are moderately resistant to change. That's kind of, I think, the 80-20 rule. That's your 80%. But and then you're going to have an extreme side of that where they're opposed to it. They think it's stupid. They think you're stupid for wanting to do it. And you got to figure out a way to be inclusive, to draw them into the process, to help them cope with their fears, not shun them or put them down for it, but work with them to help them see the bigger picture and to see the benefits both socially and economically. And so I think my advice to all my peers is keep that in mind and make it part of your curriculum of how you approach this whole conversion.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It was, and I think that's where FTA funding comes in. So like, yeah, we 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I had to do a lot of things sort of on an island to get it kind of rolling. And Macy can probably familiar with this. Like, you just have to do a lot of things to start getting the buy-in, and it's a slow process. So it's kind of why starting early with the utility and then starting early, as he mentioned, with your agency. 100% agree.
Okay, in an effort to keep moving with time here, and this has come up as an audience question, how has your agency planned for resiliency?
I can go first if you want. Two things. One is we did put in a large diesel generator, about 1.3 megawatts. So as long as there's diesel fuel, if there was some kind of electrical interruption, as long as there's diesel fuel, we can keep the buses charged and we can keep service on the road. If there isn't diesel fuel availability and there's an electrical outage, neither buses would run anyway. You wouldn't have your diesel fleet running, and you're not going to have your electric. If there's multiple fuel interruptions, you can't build resilience against every possible outage. So what we try to do is simply build in some resilience for a brief electrical outage, and that 1.3 kilowatt generator will definitely, or megawatt generator, definitely keep us in business as long as we have access to diesel fuel. Once diesel fuel becomes unavailable, or CNG supply a pipeline gets broken or something, all fleets are equally impacted. But going to our own solar field then virtually doubles our resilience, because we could still draw off the power grid if we have a total failure of our solar field, but we don't anticipate that.
Great.
So for us, we're starting to address that. For our depots, we're typically double-ended switchboards, which means we typically take 2 lines in, which gives us some resiliency. We have automatic transfer switches. We're looking at diesel, I guess, generators as well. The problem is, if I have 7.5, 10 megawatts of depot charged buses, I mean, that gets to be taking up a lot of space again, as Erica mentioned, and then also pretty darn expensive infrastructure to maintain, just with all the EPA rules. So we're starting to look at solar. I think, obviously, as Macy said, I think what they're doing is awesome. I hope to get some people in the Midwest on board. We seem to be behind the Western and Eastern states as far as, I don't know exactly how Macy's funding all that, but utility investment. I think utilities in the Midwest should start investing in some of these projects. We can't just rely on the FTA to do everything, which is sort of what we've been doing to date. But we're trying to reach out through the ICC and energy commissions and opportunities in trying to get some of that done. I think, again, when Macy has, I assume you have a battery, some sort of battery system storage, ESS tied to that solar grid,
Right.
which is fantastic. And, I think that's something we should look at with a heavy eye. I think studying sort of, overall sort of probabilistic determination of ComEd power outages and figuring out, okay, what's the likelihood, right? Is it, if it's, a couple thousandths of a percentage chance that we'll have an outage for more than 3 hours, and then we'll just right size all the equipment. So I think what Antelope's doing with the solar field is awesome. I hope to follow in their footsteps. We've tried a few times, but hopefully we'll be successful on some more grants. So.
Yeah, and Jason, to answer your question, we have about 9 megawatts of battery storage tied into that solar field. And we did it via a 25-year power purchase agreement. So,
nice. With a local utility investor or just a third-party sort of energy company?
Third-party, Duke Energy.
Oh, Duke, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Is that all done or in process?
No, one of the processes that surprised me and has slowed things down considerably is the FTA process for land acquisition. There's so many hurdles you got to jump to get their record of the decision to allow you to buy the land, and it's just surprising. So we're in the process of that. We just completed our NEPA and CEQA reports, California Environmental Air Quality reports. Those are into the city for the 45-day review period for public comment. We had to do not only an appraisal, but we had to have the appraisal reviewed by an FTA-approved appraiser. And there are not a lot of those guys around, so you got to track them down and get on their schedule. So it's been a little bit of a process, but we should be under contract here in the next 90 days.
Nice. Yeah, we've been struggling with the NEPAs as well for on-route charging. So I think it's something we're going to have to look at as a community with the FTA and figure out sort of what is, right? Electrification is obviously the goal and the push. So how do we help streamline some of these processes so we don't sort of shoot ourselves in the foot and delay implementation more than it could or should be?
Right.
Great. So to stay on schedule here, we have some great audience questions. So I'm going to go through our Q&A and I'll pose these to our panelists and fire away with your answers. So Macy, you noted before that you had some measurements related to environmental impacts and economic benefits. Would you mind sharing those with us?
Be happy to. In the last 2 years, as we ramped up, we went from 2 vehicles to 4 vehicles to 8 vehicles. So there was a slow ramp up to a full-size fleet. But during that ramp up and accelerating within the last 2 years, even with COVID and having to shrink our service down quite a bit during that period, we've crossed over 5 million electric miles. 5 million electric miles. In that, we've saved 1.2 million gallons of diesel fuel, which has resulted in net savings of $1.6 million after paying for electricity.
Wow.
That represents a carbon footprint reduction of more than 30 million pounds of CO2 and a reduction of 72,500 pounds of particulate matter. And that's just with 54 vehicles in 2 years, effectively. We piled up to 5 million miles. In addition to the California low carbon fuel standard credits legislation, we've earned through December 31st, $2,262,000 in LCFS credits, and have another 450,000 that we could sell right now, accumulated through Q1 of this year. And what we did with that first check, $2.2 million, We spent $300,000 of it building a world-class fitness center for our employees as a thank you for all their hard work and dedication to bring this journey to a very successful start. So they have a 6,000 square foot, fully equipped wellness center, including a yoga room on property that's free of charge to any employee or their spouse.
What a great use of saved funds.
Yeah, we, the chairman of our board and the whole board of directors were passionately committed to showing some kind of a token of appreciation to the staff. So.
Okay, this question was directed at Matthew. Does the FTA envision a Tiger or Build style competitive grant program to support bus electrification?
Sure. At the present time, I don't know of any push to specifically add, let's say, or a specific program under Build, as Build has replaced Tiger, just for bus electrification, fleet electrification. That said, we have had multiple Build projects for which this was a component of, such as, I think Macy mentioned one and things like that. Do we have, that I'm aware of, a plan to create a separate subset under Build? Not that I'm aware of, but again, I think there will be continued interest in these Build type projects featuring zero emission vehicles. I think that's a given.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I feel like this is the $1 million question, and we could probably talk days, but one of the main focuses of our presentation is, can anyone provide recommendations for prioritizing routes and or garages for implementation in stages? Where is the best place to start?
I think we're looking at sort of some of the loan criteria, so equity, socioeconomic path of travel of the routes, and then I think sort of once you get a critical mass of those characteristics, as well as exposure and ridership levels, I think you can start to sequence some of your garages. But the thing for us having 7 garages is that, you know, we started out of Chicago Garage, which is, you know, obviously part of the 66 Chicago Avenue, and so, you know, rather than having like partial electrification going on at every garage, it's most likely that we'll do a garage or two with some delay in between, so we're not touching a lot of projects all at once. I think it makes sense from a utility perspective. You don't want to have to keep tearing it up. So if I need 10 megawatts, say at full capacity, I don't want to have to go back to ComEd and tear everything up, you know, every 3 or 4 years as I add another 50 or 60 buses. So I think that's part of the equation. I'll let Macy chime in.
Jason, you're absolutely right. I think, you know, if you have some of those options available to you, obviously look at your shortest routes first. If they're achievable in a single charge, you get those, start moving those routes over as you then take the time to really study your entire route system and figure out where opportunity charging needs to come in, how much of it needs to get installed, how long it's going to take to get that installed, given the environmental impact studies and all the other work that needs to get done. But if you have 40 routes or 50 routes that are all 100, 120 mile routes, those could probably be done without opportunity charging. And so that's a good way to start out. Just a simple, go out, do your job, come in at night and plug in.
I feel like a common theme that we've discussed today is the holistic approach of being collaborative and really engaging all those stakeholders in the beginning. So you're connecting to the FTA to look for those grant funding, and you're having those early discussions with your utility. You're developing solutions, you're working with your technical engineers and your planners, and you're creating a master plan that leads to optimization and flexibility and future growth and resiliency. So there's a lot of components to think about, and I think that in my experience, it's been that every transit agency has unique challenges, that no two plans are the same. They are all varying, and it's not always right the first time. You learn from your mistakes, and technology advances, and you keep moving forward so you can achieve that 100% electrification and those environmental and sustainability goals that you've set to accomplish. Okay, we have about 2 minutes left, so I am going to let our panelists give any closing remarks if there's something burning that we were unable to discuss today. So we'll start with Matthew.
Again, it's really been an honor to be here today, participate. Zero emissions technology is something that FTA strongly supports, is coupled with a reduction in greenhouse gas and our administration's environmental goal. Entities, transit agencies, as they pursue this journey, be a resource again in the multi-source bus testing, our research and development projects, our Buy America program, and of course our grants targeted either specifically or for which battery electric bus projects, both vehicles as well as facilities, can be a part of. And again, we look forward to being that partner on the journey as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason?
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. I always like talking about this subject. As Erica mentioned, it's a lot of variables go into it, and it seems to always be changing. So you're never gonna get bored, and you're always gonna be learning something new. So it's a lot of fun working in this space, and we're gonna be doing a lot of big changes here in the next couple of decades. So thanks again.
Thank you. Macy?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be on this panel. It's been a joy, a real honor. Always nice learning and hearing from other agencies and how they're doing it. I do want to tip my hat to the FTA one more time. We've been a recipient. I referred to 2 Lono grants. They actually totaled $6.9 million, the 2 Lono grants, and the build grant we got was for $8.6 million. So there's been a tremendous support and partnership from the DOT and the FTA, and we couldn't be more grateful, appreciative. So thank you.
Thank each of you. I'm very thankful for your expertise and insights as subject matter. I follow each of your agencies and technology advancements, and very much appreciate the collaborative environment to learn from each other. So thank you for your time today. Thank you to everyone who joined us. We will send out this presentation has been recorded, so you'll receive a link that will give you access that you can watch it again or share it with colleagues. If there are any questions that were not answered, we'll send a follow-up email as well that can answer those. And then Jason also noted that he had a couple of images that he would like to share. We can share the questions that we asked today. And if anyone needs anything related to fleet electrification or questions about today, please feel free to reach out to me. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for all the arrangements, Erica.
My pleasure.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Well done. Take care, Erica.
Thanks, Erica, and thanks, everyone.